Hello knitters, Faye Lim from Strand Knitting Studio in San Clemente, California. And today I have some classes and I have a tutorial. Stay tuned. Okay, so we have 3 classes coming up in March. I know it's already March. The sweater class is on the 15th, and this is how to begin your sweater. And since I have to talk about this a lot now, because it's a monthly class, I'm actually going to put a full description of it at the end of this video. So after the credit runs, there'll be a full description of what you need to do to be ready for the sweater class and what you'll be doing and all that kind of good stuff. So, but there is a sweater class Saturday the 15th from 12 to 2, and I have a few spots still left for this one. And if you want more information, go to the end. Okay, the next class I have coming up is Ravelry. Now, Ravelry is all things fiber, knit, and crochet. It's an enormous database that is added to daily from around the world. So everybody has their own account, and you have your projects page, and you put stuff in your, you get the pattern you're going to do, you add the yarn. All of this is super simple to do because it's just click, and it's like you don't have to really look up anything. It's all the information's there. So like if you put in a yarn, like the name of the yarn, it's going to have the name of the yarn. You put in the color, but it already has all the, like how many yards there are and what it's made of, all that stuff. It's already in there. So you don't have to do that. You just have to put the name of the yarn and then how many skeins you've got, and needle size is a good idea to have there. So this for you is a way to keep track of your projects. So and even if you think you like to do the paper thing, because I'm all about having a notebook that you write stuff down as you go when you're knitting a pattern. This is like the archive of your patterns, and you always know exactly where to go to find them, and you can always, and if you make your notes, and they don't have to be a lot, it depends on what it is, how many notes you can make. Don't have to make any notes. You can make write a book. It doesn't matter. You can do whatever you want, but you will know, you can go into your Ravelry and find that pattern and that project and see what it was. When did you make it? How long ago? What needle size did I use? All that kind of good stuff. So I highly suggest you do both because they actually have 2 different functions. So what it has is it's got hundreds of thousands of patterns in there. All the new patterns get put in there. All the new designers put their patterns in there. So even if they're on Etsy, if they're on Pinterest or other things, Instagram, 9 times out of 10, they also have the pattern on Ravelry because it's just too good of a database for them to be able to sell patterns through. So I would buy, you're still buying from them, but I would buy it through Ravelry because then it goes into my library. And so now I know exactly where all my patterns, I can just go one place to find my patterns. Where if you buy them on Etsy, you buy them on Pinterest, you buy them in these different places, it's like, oh, where did I buy that pattern? Was it on Etsy? Was it on, where is it? So the pattern, 100,000 of patterns and a massive filtering system. So you can start with, it's a knit or crochet. Is it free or is it bought or is it in a book that you own or a magazine that you own? Then you can go what size yarn. I'm doing a DK. I'm going to be on a size 8 needle. I want to knit a cardigan, and I want it to have cables. So you can put all that. Or I want to knit a cardigan and I want it to be drop sleeves. Or I want to knit a pullover and I want it to be a crew neck and drop sleeves. And, so you can start just mixing and matching what it is you want for this. I want it to have some lace. I want it to be simple. There's a difficulty rating. Piece of cake. I need it to be piece of cake. And then that's who you'll do. So the filtering system is what makes this work so well, is because you can really hone in on what you're looking for and find exactly what you're looking for. So that's just part of it. That's like the top little layer, but that's the layer we use most often. And then there's other things in there. So the class is going to be at your house and at my house on Zoom, because then I can share my screen and you can be on your screen and we can sit there and be, this is where you find this is how you do this is how you add yarn, this is how you add your project. It's all super easy. It's very intuitive and it's just clicking things. So that's what the class is. So just to learn more about Ravelry, and even if you sort of use it. There's tons of it you don't know about because it's tons of it. And there's tons of groups. You can talk to designers. The designers are all on there, and they almost always will answer questions about a pattern. Or if they also always have a group, and you might find answers to the questions in the different discussions that have gone on that are listed. That's how you also find knit-alongs, and it's a great way to get into a lot of trouble. And your knitting time goes over there while you're on Ravelry. Happens. So anyways, it's going to be Wednesday, March 15th. Nope, scratch. It's going to be Wednesday, March 19th from 6 to 7. And again, we're on Zoom. Now, I suggest you have 2 screens. So the bigger screen, I think, is the one you want to watch the Zoom on. No, the smaller screen might be. Anyways, 2 screens. Your computer, iPads, phones, whatever you have. 2 screens work really well, mostly because you can be on Zoom and then you can be on Ravelry. So one's on Zoom here and one you're doing the Ravelry along with me. So the one that you can sit there and punch buttons to. So, and then you'll need to just be able to know how to do Zoom. So, anyway, so that is Wednesday the 19th from 6 to 7. And then the last class for this month is sock class. So we're going to learn to knit socks top down. This is going to be cuff down, and we're going to do baby socks. Always do baby socks. So the baby socks, because it takes you no time to get to here. This is the problem in a sock. This is the part, except for the magic loop part, so we got to learn magic loop. But this is the part everybody's like, their brains have a hard time wrapping around what's happening, because we are actually, constructing 3D out of a 2D kind of thing. This is a 3D thing. And so there's things you have to do to make things go the way they need to go around the foot and everything. And so this is the hardest part. Okay, and that's the part you got to get your head wrapped around. Each little thing on its own isn't hard. It's just wrapping your head about what am I doing and why am I doing this. So you will knit, in one skein we use the Cashmere Merino, Ella Ray's Cashmere Merino, and out of one skein you can get 3 socks, 3 separate socks. And I suggest you do 3 socks. And then by the 3rd sock, you should sort of know, like, okay, I'm gonna like this or I'm not. Do not think you're going to knit one sock and decide whether you're a sock knitter, because the answer is going to be no. And so you need to knit at least 3 socks and give your head a chance to understand what's happening so that you can just start doing it. Because once you understand, plain socks are the best. I mean, they're mindless. They're truly mindless. They're like, you cast on, you do a rib, you knit an adult, you're knitting like that long and round. And then you come to your heel, and now you've got maybe an hour that you're going to have to concentrate. And now you're doing the foot. That's just knitting in the round, and then you got to do the toe, and that's nothing. So so there's only these couple little touch points of things that you need to do, but the rest of the time you're just knitting. So it's a really good travel. I travel with socks all the time. And of course there are many sock patterns. Sock patterns are prolific. There are thousands and thousands of them. Different constructions, because there are different ways. You can also do toe up, different heel styles, different, and then the pattern on the actual sock. They got cables, they got lace, they've got Fair Isle, a lot of Fair Isle socks patterned. Weird constructions. People like just think of things and construct it, and it's a weird construction, but it fits really well. And so there's just a lot to do on sock, and there are people who that's all they knit is socks. That they're sock knitters. That's what they do. And so it's quite a world to get into. And I love my socks. I have many socks, and I love my socks, and I wear them all winter long. I'm wearing wool socks. So yeah. So anyway, so that class is March 29th, which is a Saturday from 12 to 2. Okay, so now the tutorial is on safety lines. Lifelines and safety lines are the 2 ways you're going to hear it most talked about. And so I'm going to show you what they are. So stay tuned. Okay, so what is a safety line or lifeline? I tend to call them a lifeline. Safety, you'll hear it called a safety line. So this is a piece of waste yarn, just a piece of yarn that you will string through your stitches. And then when you are, if you make a mistake up here, then you're able to take it off your needles, pull it out. It will stop right here at the line that this yarn's running through, and the stitches will be up on this yarn, so they can't drop down any further. And you can easily put your needle through your stitches and continue. So I'm going to show you sort of from the end of it to the beginning of it, because I needed this lifeline to be in and some knitting on top of it, so I can show you what happens. Okay, so let's say I made it, totally screwed it up, and I don't think I can fix it, and so I just literally take this off my needles. Now this scares every knitter I ever do this with, but if you look, as long as you're not pulling on it, this just sits here. It's not going anywhere. It's not like it dissolves. Now, there are plant silk especially, but there are some plant fibers that you may not want to do this with unless you've got a lifeline. But if you're just trying to pull out a row and go back on, there are certain things that you wouldn't do that. Also, if you're using really big needles for the yarn so that the stitches are big and loosey, those you're gonna, if it's a row, you're just gonna take out the row, because it's easily that the stitches start moving down through other stitches because they're so big and loose. But if it's just a typical, fabric, then, and it's any kind of animal hair blend, whatever, it doesn't dissolve on you. In order for you to start having problems, you're gonna have to start pulling on it. And as you see, as I start pulling on it, then things are gonna wanna start coming out. Okay, so don't pull on it. That's all you have to do. Don't pull on it. You can pick it up, but don't pull on it. Okay, so let's say I've got a mistake. I'm now just gonna pull my knitting out. I'm just pulling it out until it stops pulling. It's gonna stop pulling. I don't even have to guess. It's just gonna stop pulling. It's right here. I can no longer pull. It stopped pulling because I'm now in the row that has the yarn through it. Okay, the next trick to picking up your stitches is to always have a smaller needle. Now, these are my interchangeables. I got something really small, so I didn't bother to put this other needle on, but you have a set of needles. So I have like a set of 4s, and I actually have some smaller, but at least a 4. If you're usually like in your 6, 7, 8, 9, whatever, then a 4 is going to do good. If you do a lot of bigger, like 11, 13, 15, then you may want like a 9 or something to go through those so they're not too loose, that those are so big compared to this 4. If you're a sock knitter, you need like a 000, because that's what's going to work. So they do make them. That goes to 000. So they do make 000. But you'll want a smaller needle. It changes especially the smaller your yarn gets, the more important this step is, because you just aren't pulling stitches out as you're trying to get the needle through and pulling the next stitch. You're pulling on the stitches trying to fall out. And the smaller needle just slides right through the stitches, what you're going to see. So now here I am. Right? And now I'm just going to pick up my stitches, and if one falls through, so if you look at this one right here, and this was my last one, that's why this sort of fell through like this. I take this one, and actually I wouldn't pull out the last stitch. Don't pull out the last stitch, because then you won't have this problem. So don't pull out the last stitch, and I'll tell you what you have to do since you didn't pull it out. But now, as you can see, the stitches are just sitting here, and it's a piece of cake to just put them on. You're not going to put them on backwards. You're probably not going to split them unless you actually split it when you were putting the waste yarn in. This is also called waste yarn. Waste yarn is yarn that's just like it's just yarn. It's not for your project and everything. Also, the yarn you use for this needs to be very close to the size of the yarn you're knitting with. So I would not put this into a chunky weight knit, because the stitch, I'll be having to pull the stitches won't go anywhere, but I would be having to pull the red thing on either side of the stitches to pull the stitches up enough for me to get into it. So match your yarn pretty closely, all right? So I'm just taking this through. It's easy, nothing's twisted, nothing's split. It's amazing. It makes this so unscary. It's the best thing in the world. It's worth the time to put it in. Okay, and now I'm back in. And I have all my stitches and everything's cool. All right, now when you're knitting your first row, now this was my smaller needle. So when I start knitting again, I need to make sure I start with my needle that I'm working for this project. And this is just a holder. Your left-hand needle is always just a holder. And then you have to find your working yarn, because if I start over here, my working yarn's over here, that's not gonna work. So actually what happened, I'm just gonna slip because I didn't put a needle over here. I'm just gonna slip my stitches over onto my needle. But you could just knit them over. You wouldn't have to take time to slip. And if you've got a lot of stitches on, just work your row. Whatever row you're gonna go on next, just work your row. with your needle that you're using for this project. Now, when you put the line in, you need to mark, like the line is in row 2, which means I will be starting row 3. You need to make sure you note that so that you know when you take this out, you know where you're starting. You're not having to go, uh-oh, now where am I? So make a note on your pattern or on your notes what row it's in, and that means which row are you going to be starting, okay? All right, so then you're going to knit. And again, I'm gonna sort of pull this out a little bit so it's out of my way. And there we go. All right, so I'm gonna knit this row. Now, the orange yarn's here. It's a little fiddly. It can get in the way sometimes. And if you split it like I did there, so I split this when I actually put the red in. So there we go. It's okay if it actually gets knit up into a stitch. That's not a problem. What's a problem is if you do split it, that sometimes that'll make it so you can't pull it out. And you just have to snip it a couple times so you can get it out, but you can't reuse it. But it's fiddly, and you just sort of make it happen. I suggest if you're doing cables that you put it in the row after the cable. So you do a cable row. Usually you do the backside row back, and it's just this plain row. Put your cable after you've done that row, and that way your cable is safe, but you're not having to knit this right after cable row because it's a little wonky. So I would do the back side of the cable row and then put the lifeline in. And I highly suggest you actually do this for cables because cables aren't easy to take out. I'm going to show you what I mean in a minute. All right, so now I'm going to knit this whole thing. There we go. And my line's back in, and that's that. All right, now, if after I've knitted maybe a couple inches, an inch, it depends on how involved your pattern is to how often you want to replace a line. If it's simple, you could probably go an inch and then maybe 2 inches or something. If it's lace and difficult, I don't know, sometimes every 4 rows might be, every other row might be for a while until you like really get the lace pattern down, and then maybe every 4, then maybe every 6 as you get the lace pattern down. Cables the same way, you know, but cables, well, what I'm doing is every row there's every 2 rows there's a cable. So it just depends on what you're knitting and how well you're knitting that technique at the time. So the least you know the technique, the more often you're going to put these in. If you've got this down, then you know you can leave longer distances between the lifelines. So to replace the lifeline, I always have 2 running. So I would knit up to wherever, and I would put it a second line. Because I've had it happen where I'm up here and all of a sudden I see a mistake, but it's actually on the line or below the line. So I have to pull the one I just pulled out, and I may have to go down to this line. But if I've already pulled this line out, I'm sort of screwed. Okay, so I keep 2 lines in, and then you just hopscotch them up. So, but let's say, so you would pull this one out, and it just pulls right out. Not a big deal. You need a tapestry needle. And all tapestry needles, so it doesn't matter if it's bent or straight, doesn't matter. You want one that isn't pointed because we've got 2 needles that we use. We use tapestry needles that are big-eyed, like, well, usually not quite this big-eyed, that are pointed, that you use for weaving stuff in. And then you have these blunt ones, which you use for doing stuff like this and sewing garments together because while you're sewing, you're not wanting to really pierce the fabric, split it out. So that's what these are for. And then, because if I have a really fluffy yarn, this is how you're going to always, this is no big deal. This yarn is easy to thread. But if it was a bigger fuzzy yarn, this is how you thread it. So you've got the skinny part, that's the fat part, that's the skinny part. So you're looking through the hole. You're going to loop and go ahead and leave yourself a good tail. And then you're going to pinch it. And you're going to pinch it where when I take out this needle, you can't see, you can barely see the yarn. Okay, so it's very smushed down. And when you keep it like this and smushed down, then even if it's really fluffy, you will be able to sort of go like that and pull it through. All right, if you try to do it like this, it's not going to happen. So the trick is pinch. The yarn is in between the fingers, you can hardly see it, and then you just wiggle your needle down into the yarn. And that pretty much will thread any kind of yarn you need to thread. If it's really, really bigger than that, you may need a different needle. Okay, so to put my line in, I'm gonna move the stitches onto the cable because that gives me much more room in the cables, in the stitches, than I have if it's on a needle. There's no room if it's on the needle. So I'm gonna move it down to the cable, and I'm literally just going in through the stitches, just lacing it through. If you have markers, go around the markers. Don't go through them, because if you go through them, you've just connected them to this row. And I have to do it like this, you guys. And so, you know, you can do it like a needle's worth and then pull. And then a needle's worth. And then pull. Until you get it all done. Trying to be careful not to split out the stitches. Don't like go through, you don't want to go through yarn like that. You don't want to do that where you split the yarn. You want to make sure you're in the stitches. And that's it. Now, if you've got a bigger project and then there's 100 stitches on or something, yeah, it's sort of a pain, but it's, believe me, that 2 minutes it's going to take you to thread this in is well worth a mistake and having to either knit it all again, which may be a couple hours worth of work, or yeah, it's worth the time and energy to do this. It's not that hard. It takes, like, depending on how many stitches you have, it's going to take, you know, a few minutes, and it's worth it. Totally worth it. Make sure your ends are long enough so that they're not going to start pulling out anywhere, and you want them just sort of hanging. You want them hanging. This is extra long. You don't need them this long. You probably want them hanging, I don't know, about, yeah. Don't scrimp on it. It's better that it's a little too long than too short and it starts wanting to sort of feed out of your stitches. So that's that. Okay, so this is still on my needles. Yeah, I know. I'm getting there. I'm really getting there. But this has taken me a while. So this is your cabling every other row, and you're doing sometimes one row. The harder rows you're doing a right leaning, a left leaning, a right leaning, a left leaning, a right leaning, a left leaning, and it's really simple to do one of those wrong. Like you end up doing 2 right ones in a row, because the difference between them is whether when you take off the 2 stitches, you put them in the back or do you put them in the front. And sometimes you can screw that up. Now this is fingering. I'm on a size, what am I on? A 5 needle. Taking this out, now I'm pretty good at getting cables out and putting them back on and fixing them and all that kind of stuff. But getting these out and not having stitches falling through on me, because it's such small yarn, was sort of a problem. It was a problem. So I started using lifeline. So you can see on this side I have a lifeline. You don't see it. You can sort of see it here, but so I have a lifeline. And for a while I was putting it on the row. I'd do my cable row, I'd come back, I put a line in. I'd do my cable row, I come back, I put a line in. And now I'm going about 4 rows. But to me, this isn't that big. So to me, this is totally worth my time to take the line out, which I can do right now. So I'm going to take the line out. It's time to put it back in. And then put it back in. And, where's my needle? Needle. You know, everything just sort of disappears on me. Okay, found my needle. So again, I'm just going to put this through, and I'm going to put it through my line, through my stitches. And so again, I'm going to keep this on. Now these again, tiny, and this needle is actually pretty big for this. So I really do have to watch it, and I'm going to keep my hands down so I can really pay attention to what's going on here. That I'm not splitting stitches. And so sometimes it's better to do less than more at a time so that you're not splitting stitches. Okay. That's back in now. I'm ready to go. So I'm ready to go, and if I screw it up, it comes back to there. So that is lifelines. All right, and that is it for today, and I hope to see you in the studio real soon. Bye. Sweater. So you're going to have your pattern, you're going to have your yarn, you're going to have knit up a swatch, and have a garment with you that fits the way you want this particular sweater to fit. It does not have to be a sweater. It can be a t-shirt, it can be a top, it can be a jacket, it can be about anything. You just want the shape, you want the width around your hips mostly, and then length of sleeves and length from, the whole length of the actual garment. Where do you want it to stop at the bottom? So that's what you're going to bring with you, so that then we can get you going correctly. So the class's goal is to get your sweater started correctly, which is half the battle. So if you get all of the math right and we get it all going good, then the chances of a really good sweater that fits perfectly is much higher, like 95%, compared to doing none of that. It's a crapshoot. So it's trying to get your sweater started correctly. If you're on a sweater already, feel free to come and join us, because it's still a sweater class. So if you're at the next part of your sweater, you need help on a sweater, go ahead and come. You can also come to any workshop to do that, but you can come to sweater class to do that too. So that's sweater class.